Hey guys, it's Miss Silva again, and we're back for lesson 3 of Unit 1. And for lesson 3, or 1.3, we're going to be looking at the key features of quadratic and absolute value functions. So our learning target is I can identify the key features of quadratic and absolute value functions. All right, we already talked about x-intercepts and y-intercepts in our previous lesson, where it's the point where the graph intersects the x-axis is your x-intercept, and your y-intercepts is the point at which the graph intersects the y-axis. Now, if you notice, I have this also known as for your x-intercepts. Now, when we are talking about quadratic functions, the x-intercepts are also known as the roots, the zeros of the function, and the solution. When we get into the unit where we talk about root zeros and solutions, it'll make more sense on why they call them those extra things. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the axis of symmetry. Now my axis of symmetry is a vertical line that goes through the middle of the graph. Now when you draw that vertical line that goes through the middle of the graph, it goes through the middle because both sides are symmetric to each other where that line is. Now that axis of symmetry is going to go through your vertex. Your vertex is either the highest or the lowest point of the graph. Now the vertex also has an additional name depending on whether it's facing up or down. It's the minimum value will be the lowest point on the graph, and the maximum value will be the highest point on the graph. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this first function, the quadratic function. Go ahead and identify the key features and then locate them. So here we have our x-intercepts, also known as the roots, the zeros, and the solution. And remember, we looked at the x-axis, and it's these 2 points right here. This is the first x-intercept, and this is the second x-intercept. And again, it's also called the zeros, the roots, and the solution. Now the locations of those points, here we're at -2 is my x value, and remember your x-intercepts always have a y value of 0, and +2 and a y value of 0. Let's now look at the x-intercepts. I'm sorry, we already looked at the x-intercepts. Let's look at the y-intercept. So if we're looking at the y-axis, the point where it intersects is this point right here. We're going to call this the y-intercept. Now that y-intercept has a location of, your x value will be 0 and your y value is -4. Your axis of symmetry, remember it's that vertical line that we're going to draw in the middle of the graph. Let's get a bright color here. So because this is the middle, we're going to draw a vertical line going through the middle. And anytime we have a vertical line, the equation is going to start with x equals. Now my axis of symmetry for the equation will be x is equal to, and because it's going through 0 on the y-axis, it'll be x is equal to 0. And let's now look for the vertex. Remember, the vertex is the lowest or the highest point on the graph. So this represents the lowest point because your graph is going up this way or down, and then it goes back up. So this is my vertex, and the location for that vertex is the same as my y-intercept, which is at 0, -4. Now, if we look at this graph, because it's facing upward, it has a minimum value. So our minimum value is at the vertex. So this vertex is also called your minimum value. Our minimum value is at y. We have a y minimum, we have a minimum value at 0, -4. And if we look, we do not have a maximum value, so we don't put anything there, not applicable. So if you notice, 0, -4 was a very important point because it represented our y-intercept, our vertex, and our minimum value. And that's for quadratic function. Your absolute value functions have identical key features. So let's go ahead and start with our x-intercepts, also known as the zeros, roots, and solution. And if we look at our x-intercepts, we look at our x-axis, notice that it's not intersecting. So it has none. Let's look for our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Now this graph crosses the y-axis here, so this is going to be my y-intercept. And the location for my y-intercept is at 0, positive. My axis of symmetry will always go through the vertex. So this is my axis of symmetry. And the equation to my axis of symmetry again starts with x equals, and because it's going through 0 and any point on this imaginary vertical line will have an x value of 0, my equation is x is equal to 0. On to our vertex. Our vertex is the highest or the lowest point. And in this case, this is my lowest point. So this is also called my vertex, and my vertex is at 0, positive 4. This one also has a minimum value at 0, positive 4, and because it has a minimum value, for this example, it does not have a maximum value, so this is not applicable. All right, go ahead and practice your key features for All right, go ahead and practice your key features for these two functions. Enjoy.